Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome. My name is Ryan Collins. I'm the executive director of the Midwest Writing Center. Thank you for being with us for the One Iron Pen Awards reading ceremony. Good time event. We're super excited for today. We've got some big announcements and we've got some big writing that we're excited to share with you. We have what appears to be most of the people who placed in the Iron Pen contest with us to share their works, which is awesome. I'm super excited. I admin the contest, but I don't read anything because I code all the submissions and I keep everything anonymous. And doing that means I don't have time to read all the submissions. So this is the first time I get to hear them, same as most of the rest of you out there. So thanks for being with us. I'm going to hand off to Sarah Elgatian, our trusted program and marketing specialist at the Midwest Writing Center, who does an excellent job doing the ones and twos with Zoom and things like that in a bit. But before we get to that, we've got some housekeeping things to do before we give away. We'll virtually give away our medals. These are the medals for first place for Iron Pen. Congratulations to all the winners. We'll be sending those off Monday, I guess, as soon as we can. And we have to do that because we had people from 16 different states participate in the Iron Pen, which I'm pretty sure is a record. That's super awesome. We had people from all over the country, from California to Florida to Ohio to Texas, to all kinds of places in between, all over the Midwest. We had 103 individuals participate and 129 registrations paid. So about a third of the group at least attempted to write more than one piece in 24 hours, a poem or a story or an essay or something else, which is just doing one of those things strikes me as a lot. So those of you who did 2 and 3, regardless of like places or whatever, like props, outstanding, much respect. That's a lot of writing and a big challenge. And we appreciate you participating. It's one of our favorite programs we do every year. Partly because the prompt is always fun. I'm someone who likes prompt writing. And so we might as well just do this now. So the prompt for this year, for those who maybe didn't participate, the line was, what I first wanted to say was more fire, which is a line from a poem. It's a line from a poem called Love, Here's the Deal. And that poem was written by the person who's going to be our keynote speaker and masterclass instructor at the writing conference this year, June 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Ross Gay. It's from this book called Bringing the Shovel Down. Ross Gay's also written several other books, including the Book of Delights, Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, which was a National Book Award finalist. Looks like this. Got a lot of sunlight in my picture. Yeah, Sarah's got some books. He just had an album come out on Jaguar of him reading his works with people like Bon Iver and Angel Bat Dawid. We couldn't be more excited that he's going to be beaming in. So that's where the prompt came from. He's a personal favorite of mine and a really, really fantastic reader, performer, thinker, bringer of joy. We couldn't be more excited to have him be part of our conference this year. He'll be joining our faculty, this is also the first time we're announcing this. Gina Franco, who's a professor at Knox College and past winner of the Canto Mundo Prize, will be teaching a poetry workshop. Latanya McQueen, who's got 2 books out and was an NEA fellow in fiction last year, will be the novel instructor. Chuy Renteria, whose first book just came out. From University of Iowa Press, he's going to be doing a memoir workshop, and Jenny Colville, also of Iowa City, who's taught at the conference before, and who's got a really terrific book of short stories, is going to be doing the short fiction class. So really stacked conference. We're super excited. I think we're going to be doing a lot of things in person, or at least kind of hybridized. So we'll have all that information coming out soon, and later on today, we'll announce the winner of the full conference registration. Everyone who participates in Iron Pen is entered into a drawing for a full conference registration. So, and that includes all of those workshops, the master class, all the good stuff. So a couple other things that we do have coming up, since we're talking about writing and we're writing from prompts. I guess this is less of a prompt, but it is a call for submissions. We're looking for poems. If you live in the Quad City area, the 6-county Quad City area, please send us poems. We just posted a call for submission. We're doing a project with Dead Poets Espresso in Moline, Illinois. We're probably going to be partnering with some other locations to feature poems by local poets. They'll just kind of be up in local businesses, particularly at Dead Poets. Throughout the month of April, we'll probably cycle through. Last year we did, I think we did 2 rounds of 15 or something like that. So we featured like around 30 poets. So send us your work. And if you're interested in maybe hosting a couple poems at your place of business or at your office or something like that, let us know. We'd be happy to print those off and bring those out and bring a little like poetry joy into your workspaces. We're excited about that. It's a fun thing. It's free to submit. Hit us up if you got any questions. Couple other things we've got coming up. We've got a flash fiction workshop coming up. Audra Kerr Brown. I'm very excited about that. That's also coming up in April. And we are also taking applications for a Young Emerging Writers Summer Internship Program. This will be the 17th year we've done the program. It's open to 15 and 19-year-old writers. Mostly it's in the Quad Cities, but last year we had a couple people from, around the way, Michigan, Iowa, China. So we're open to making it work. We're looking forward to meeting again, mostly in person, as things are starting to open back up a little bit. So check that out. All that information's up on our website at www.mwcqc.org. Yeah, I think that's most of the news that's fit to print right now. I'm going to hand it back off to Sarah, because she's the coolest and she's the host with the most. So Sarah is going to handle all of the announcement of the winners and introducing the readers. So Sarah, take it away, and I will see you all at the end of the reading for the raffle drawing.
Thank you so much, Ryan. For anyone who has not interacted with Midwest Writing Center in the last couple of years, I am so madly in love with this organization, which is why I desperately wanted to work here. So when I'm gushing, it came first love and then employment. So I'm super, super pumped about this contest. I used to participate in it every year. And it's something, I mean, it's super hard no matter what, because it's 24 hours. You don't know what you're doing till you're doing it. But there's something really like, I don't know, it feels like sort of a almost level playing field in a lot of ways. And also the presentation of the winners is pretty wild too, because like, I don't know anything about anyone. And, normally like you prepare for an event like this. Yeah, so it seemed like I was not on camera, so that was weird. And also I want to thank Ryan for the big reveal, because I could not keep my mouth shut another second about Ross Gay being our keynote and masterclass teacher. I'm so excited. Now with all of that said, I'm pumped to finally get into the meat and potatoes. So we're going to start with fiction, then we'll do poetry, then nonfiction. We're going to start with honorable mentions, then third, second, and first place for each category. And then apologies if you specifically told me that you didn't want to read and I forgot. But our first reader with an honorable mention is R.A. Savory with Change from fiction.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I take it you can all hear me. Change. Some people just have to work harder than others at being upbeat throughout the monotony of life. And life can be pretty monotonous at times. Take me back when I was in my early 20s. I'd been bouncing around from one contractor to another, trying to make money, make more money. Long-term benefits of any kind didn't interest me. Cash, now, that's what gets youth motivated. This youth, anyway. I'd hired on with the framing crew in Podunk, Kansas. That's not quite right. The builder who owned the company gave me over to the bunch that had just started a new house. He built houses from the ground up, subcontracting only the plumbing, electrical, carpeting, and roofing. Two other guys started about the same time as me. One was a carpenter about 10 years older. The other was a foreman. I didn't care much for the foreman, nor did many of the other guys. The boss, Lewis, kept stealing him to acquaint him with the different sites and projects currently going up. It had been raining off and on for the better part of 2 weeks, so the bulk of the outfit was working in the company's shop. Two expansive metal buildings connected by a little wood frame annex that served as an office of sorts. From the outside, it looked like an overgrown outhouse, nestled in between these two huge metal structures. This outfit had a lot of construction going on, a couple of subsidized housing projects, several spec houses, and 5 custom builds. The company also built a lot of custom concrete forms to be shipped all over the country, though most of that business came from big outfits in California and the Pacific Northwest. With all the new framing came a lot of prefab work, nailing partitions and corners together, cutting door and window trimmers and headers, all stuff that could be done in the shop. On my second or third day, the boss had taken Whitey, the new foreman, on a walk around the shop, stopping now and then to introduce him to the workers who'd been with him the longest. At the walk-in door, he stopped. After reaching up to flash the main light switch on and off, he called us together to introduce the new man. When it had quieted down, Lewis announced simply, "Guys, this is your new slave driver, Whitey." I had noticed Whitey looking around repeatedly in a disconcerted manner during the tour, his attention being drawn to an area or small gathering of workers, followed by a frown. Following the introduction, Whitey looked around the entire group with that same disjointedness. After considerable time, he said, "Well, Lewis, I'm not as bad as all that. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I want you to know if there's ever a problem, anything at all, feel free to bring it to me. This means all of you, not just you straw bosses." The lines on his forehead deepened. His eyes narrowed. "I know it's too soon for me to..." Whitey looked at Lewis, considering, then pursed his lips. "It's just that, in my experience, I've worked for companies with crews that were happy and some that weren't, some who made money for those companies and some that didn't. I've seen the importance of attitude." For a few moments, he studied the men, their reactions practically non-existent. He gave Lewis a final glance before finishing. "Well, I'll leave it at that for now. I do look forward to working with you." "Well, let's go check the new site out before it washes away," Lewis said, hurrying Whitey out the door. The prefabricated concrete forms were put together, sanded, and oiled in the larger of the 2 shop buildings. One end of it housed the saw shop, where all the assembly line type cutting took place. The saw shop area was elevated 4 feet from the rest of the shop. There was a gigantic bandsaw that would have made Tim Allen weak in the knees. It was positioned within a huge cutting platform that was kept slicker than a shuffleboard table. When a bunch of gung-ho blue-collar workers used to working outdoors, outside, gets thrown into a shop, it gets a little crowded, no matter how big the shop is. A lot of stepping on one another's toes. It was more than uncomfortable for me, being the new guy, having questions with every task I encountered. When I got mandated to the saw shop, it was a bittersweet opportunity. I was helping grind the rough edges of this overgrown snake-like monstrosity of a form for a concrete tube when John, the most senior carpenter, walked up and told me Lonnie needed help. "He's about to blow his stack," John said. "That fucking new guy, Don, isn't here today. Doctor's appointment or something." I pulled my mask down to my chin and looked at the grinder in my hands. I'd been around enough as the FNG, fucking new guy, at different jobs to know if you do what anybody tells you, you eventually get your ass in a sling. Don't worry about the grinding. This abortion is Joe's. We know what's going on with Whitey, the new foreman. But if somebody doesn't get over and help Lonnie, and quick, there'll be hell to pay. Respectful of his seniority, I nodded and said, "You're the boss," so to speak anyway. I put the grinder down and started for the saw shop, dusting my legs and arms off as I walked. From a distance, the table appeared to have been constructed around the saw and its operator. I walked up the 3 steps to the platform to the open area where Lonnie stood behind the bandsaw. He was a big boy, a head taller than me, twice my weight, maybe more. He was cutting some 2x4 blocks using a jig tacked to the bandsaw table. His hair was yellow, but red would have matched his present demeanor better. I could see the heat in his eyes and exaggerated gestures. "You here to help me?" Lonnie asked when I was close enough to hear him over the cacophony of grinders, saws, air nailers, and hammering. His soft-spoken voice surprised me, though I couldn't deny the energy required to maintain it. "Yeah," I said, extending my hand. I'd barely seen him in my few days here. I looked at an unorganized pile of wooden parts strewn across the far edge of the table. "What's all that?" I asked, cognizant of the need to keep cutting areas clean of debris. Lonnie's hands went flying in all directions. He shook his head. "Aw, those frickin' new guys out there," he said with a swoop of his arm. "They say that dumbass new guy Bill miscut them, so they're bringing them all back. Now he doesn't even show. I got other stuff to do. I can't be fixing someone else's screw-ups." Having plenty to do is the best thing that can happen for a new worker. At least I'd always found it so. Lonnie got me started on cutting new parts and fixing the mistakes, recutting the 2 long ones and utilizing the 2 short ones for other applications. Lonnie and I got along really well right from the start. The slew of miscuts soon disappeared from the table. The workers nailing and gluing the forms together stopped bringing me new ones. During one of our short breaks, I said to Lonnie, "The guys seem to be in a better mood. Was Bill's cutting the cause of all the bad vibes I was getting from everybody? I mean, I know how it is when the weather keeps a crew stuck indoors, but these guys seemed like the most unfriendly bunch I'd ever seen. Reminded me of a job I had where the company was only working because they were court-ordered to finish certain obligations. They already lost their ass, and for the last 2 weeks, payroll checks started bouncing. Yeah, it's the weather, and part of it's because of Bill. And there's another thing. You being new and all, I don't know whether to say. Go ahead. Better for me to see a reason for their shitty attitudes instead of me quitting because I think it's me." "Well, the biggest thing is these guys didn't like the way Lewis got rid of the old foreman. Some of these guys go way back." "So what happened?" Lonnie shrugged his broad shoulders. "For the last year or so, we've been changing companies that provide products we needed to do our job. Glues and hand tools and stuff like that. Mostly cheaper stuff. Then it started happening with the lumber and metal companies. We've always gotten lumber from a local company. Then the boss went with this big national outfit that gets stuff trucked in from God knows where. A lot of it's unusable. Anyway, Rocky, the old foreman, put his foot down. He told Lewis we weren't going to build with this shitty lumber anymore. He told him if the next load of lumber wasn't local, he'd quit, and he stuck to it. Well, I said, sometimes it takes a lot to just keep on doing what you're doing, and then when something changes for the worse, you want to just quit doing anything. Lonnie cocked his head at me, and I chuckled before adding, well, then you just gotta do what you gotta do. Oh, yeah, you and the Duke, huh? So that was pretty much the atmosphere for most of that week. A real glum lot to be around. I was more than grateful to be working with Lonnie. Even being on that elevated floor seemed to help. I've never worked in blue-collar situations where there wasn't music, either hard rock pounding away in competition with all the construction frenzy, or sad sack country blues wailing away in time with hammers. Then, around 10 a.m. on September the 11th. This somber bunch of guys that I've been working with for only a few days suddenly came alive. When I think back on it, I realize it arose more from fear than anything else. I was new to these guys, but Lonnie had worked the best part of his life, he was about 40, with many of them. It probably had a lot to do with how quickly I did get to know them. They would come up while Lonnie and I were cutting on something just to talk. It seemed like maybe there was a lot of conflicting and emotional talk going on down on the fabrication floor that made each man unsure of himself, and he needed to get away. Whenever I see one of them meander his way to the steps to the saw shop, I'd shut down the bandsaw in expectation of a long and wordy conversation between Lonnie and whoever it was. While the workers' emotions ranged from anger and sorrow, Lonnie remained calm and thoughtful. Listening to the men, I was reminded of things I'd read about the Revolutionary War. Now and then, someone would come up talking of going home to weapon up, to prepare, to get ready for war. Invariably, though, however excited or agitated they might be at first, they would always walk away somewhat calmer. This coming and going of individual workers to the saw shop seemed to go in waves. As more defined explanations and confirmed reporting came over the radio, the overall disposition of the men improved, although the work they accomplished was done so with more noise, more conversation, and more heart than earlier. Lewis and Whitey returned late in the afternoon. Whitey stopped Lewis on his way to the office, taking time to look out and survey the workers. "What's the matter?" said Lewis. "Maybe nothing. To the men this morning, what I first wanted to say was, 'More fire!'" The end.
Thank you so much. That ending was perfect. Thank you so much. Next up, another honorable mention. This is me trying to read my screen and look at a person. Will be Cheetal Mehta. Cheetal, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I just want to make sure I'm audible and clear. Perfect. The burning. When she asked me if I wanted to do anything else, I first wanted to tell her that the fire needed more flames so the body could burn properly. On another day, I would have just pushed the body into an electric chamber and pressed a few buttons that would reduce the body to ashes in exactly 30 minutes. But today, of all days, the electricity went out just when she brought in her father, placed peacefully in the seat of her car, wrapped in a long white cloth with his nostrils closed with cotton balls, his toes tied together with strings. I am good at burning bodies because I've been doing this for 10 years. In a village of Salem, a small city in South India, I was 15 when I first helped my father place the body on the pyre. He told me I had to place the exact number of wooden logs, which was 3 logs on each side, to make sure the flames spread across the body evenly. The first body I burnt with my father was of a 10-year-old girl who had died after falling from the terrace of the building where she lived. After that, I had to start burning bodies all by myself because one evening, my father fought with a neighbor over the television noise coming from his house. The neighbor, who was an angry young man in his late 20s, smashed my father's head with a rock. I had to burn him as well because I didn't have the money to pay someone else for the pyre. My mother thought I was lucky to have the chance to place my father on the pyre. "You must have been good to someone in your previous birth, Mahesh," my mother said when I cried later. After I burn a body, I usually pack the ashes in a small plastic container and handed it to the members of the bereaved family. Today, when the electricity was shut off because of some government mismanagement and I couldn't get the generator to work, I had to open the storage room where we stored wood. "Mahesh, get to work. Today you won't get time for rest." "The power will come in the evening only," said Chokalingam, the man who paid me my wages. Along with Ramu, I picked the logs and set them aside for the funeral. Around 10 in the morning, I saw her entering the crematorium with a white car parked outside. And I wasn't surprised with the way she looked. The square-shaped face that was perfectly shaped by patient hands, the fish-shaped eyes, and the eyelashes that stretched a little farther. and the clear skin that reminded me of a smooth rock I had picked up one day from the forest. The thought that rang inside my head was this: what was a woman doing at a crematorium? As Hindus, women never accompanied men to funerals. It was a place reserved for men. She was dressed in a sandal-colored churidar. Her chest was covered with a netted shawl. She called out for me and said, "Anna, my father passed away today morning. Can you help me with the funeral?" Before I could respond, Ramu said, "What are you doing here? You don't have any other men in the family to help you?" "I have nobody," she said. I whispered to Ramu that it wasn't okay to send her back with a dead body in the van. So I directed her to have a seat on a wooden stool while Ramu and I carried her father to prepare him for the funeral. After placing the body at the ground, I arranged a few wooden logs surrounding it. I dropped some pieces of camphor, sandalwood, and mango leaves. I also placed some plates of dried cow dung, which would help the body burn for a longer time. Later, when it was time to begin, I asked her if she wanted to sit and wait. "I lied him. Please give me the fire," she said. I was surprised again because it was a son's job to light the fire. I had never seen a daughter do it. I still doubted if she'd be able to do it, but I decided not to argue. From a stack of pile, I chose a neat piece of wood, light enough for her to carry. I placed a small cotton cloth around the end of the piece and dipped it in a ball of oil. With a match, I lighted it and offered it to her. She wept first, the black in her eyes smeared with the white parts of her face. She looked broken, and yet she looked like she had just stepped out of a bath. I wanted to reach over and hold her, but I knew I shouldn't. Firstly, I had never touched a woman, so I wouldn't know if it was the right thing to do. Second, she needed to cry. My mother said that after a death, it was important to cry as a way of emptying the soul. "You want to do it?" I asked her. "Yes," she said, and took the burning piece of wood from my hand. I stood beside her and she lighted the fire. Her father was being swallowed in slow flames. She threw a small silver bracelet in the fire. She had stopped crying and simply stared at the flames. I could still see her father's face when the fire was yet to reach. An hour passed and there was still more left of him. "Should I pour more oil?" she asked. "He needs more fire," I said, as I brought another piece of lighted wood. I asked her again if she'd rather wait and see, but she refused. She picked the piece and lighted the fire again. This time, her father's body raised in the flames as if he were dancing inside them. He was covered in yellow light as we waited and watched. Another hour passed, and there was a lot of smoke and black left behind. Chucklingam came in to check and tell that there would be no more bodies for the day. He had directed them to a nearby crematorium where they had electricity supply. Well, I'll stop there. Well, that's a little bit more, but I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so much. Well, for those who participated, we'll get back to you, but now I want to know the end of the story, and I'm going to try and figure out a way to get everyone in. Thank you again. I'm excited, as I always am. Our next reader is our final honorable mention in fiction, Hannah Scott Ravikumar.
All right.
Agreed.
Okay. It had been a dry summer, made the houses easier to burn. The latest burning was just a few streets away. Bernabé Visconti himself had sealed up the house as the timber burnt, trapping in the unfortunate souls who could have brought plague to the city of Milan. The air was always tinged with the sickly sweetness of burning bodies. Pray you don't start coughing. Gianna heard nothing but the guards outside, patrolling the twisted cobbled streets, checking for symptoms: black buboes, black tinged fingertips, sweats, chills, stomach pain, coughing. There were no windows in the small kitchen of their house. All she knew of the outside was what she heard. The steam from the cooking fire coated her skin in a sticky heat as she prepared breakfast for her father and brothers. 3 eggs she had gathered from their chickens, small slices of dark brown bread. She would not be allowed to eat any of this. She sliced a piece of bread for herself and stuffed it in her mouth quickly before one of her brothers came in and saw that she was eating food that they felt they deserved more. She placed the breakfast on cracked plates and took it out to their main room, where her father and brothers all waited by their rickety table with just 3 wooden chairs. She was not afforded a chair. She was not important enough. and her bed was shoved into the corner of the room, just a few blankets on the softest part of the ground. She set the plates down in front of them, the weight of the quickly digested bread sitting uneasily in her stomach. Filippo was the first to complain. "This is it?" Her father next. "We work hard to bring home food for you, and you eat it all yourself." Damiano jumped in, gleeful. "She can't even cook an egg properly. Even the church won't take her. No wonder she's still not married. One day, she won't be our problem." Filippo sniggering, Damiano laughing, her father smirking. Gianna said nothing of how her elder brother was dismissed from his apprenticeship for missing too many days to drink with his friends, of how her father wasted away at home, insisting that he would get more money for hiring her out to willing men than working anyways, of how her younger brother, Damiano, had robbed a neighbor and needed her savings to prevent the neighbor from throwing him in prison, of how she was left to cook for them, clean for them, wait on money that never came, pay their rent. If she brought this up, she was meddling. She was 20 and tired. Marriage was her only way out, yet she knew that was another life of being controlled by a man, giving him children until he tired of her, if she was lucky, if she survived childbirth, survived her husband's family. She thought of Francesca, the dream that got her through the toughest days, where they cooked together, laughed together, walked in the sun together. The smoke scratched her throat, but she did not cough. There was plague at the walls of the city, threatening to come in. Europe was dying in the thousands, the millions. There was nothing they could do to stop it. Visconti had promised the plague would not come to Milan. Except the plague had come. Why else was he walling people up in their homes and burning them? There were no plague deaths in Milan. She left while her father and brothers ate the lunch she'd prepared, walking quickly over rough cobbled stones to the Piazza del Duomo. Her hair behind her in a long braid, her skirt trailing in the dirt of the cobbled streets, her skin warming in the friendly sun. Before the plague, before the nobles fled to the countryside and many more prayed, this was a place where people would stand outside the cathedral, meet with friends, exchange ideas. Now it was silent. She had a few minutes to meet with Francesca before her father noticed she was missing. Gianna spotted Francesca right away, standing by the very corner of the Gothic cathedral underneath its eye-like windows and intricate spires. Even if the piazza had been crowded, Gianna would have found Francesca in an instant. Francesca was wearing the bracelet Gianna had woven for her out of twine, the wisps of her dark hair glittering gold in the summer sun. "It's ready," Francesca said. "We can leave today." Gianna hardly dared believe it. "Your mother?" "She is coming with us." Gianna grasped her hand, feeling light as sweat gathered at her forehead. Francesca glanced around them, a smile dancing on her lips, her dark eyes lit with bronze fire. She kissed Gianna's cheek. "Tonight," Gianna said. "Tonight," Francesca said, squeezing Gianna's hand. Gianna felt the world spin with her as she turned away from Francesca. Francesca had secured a home, their home. It was the future Gianna had used as escapism, a dream she'd never imagined could be reality, a life away from her brothers, away from her father, away from their foul breath and their hands always outstretched to take. She would have her freedom. "Where have you been?" Gianna stopped at the back door. "Checking on the chickens," she said. "No, you weren't," her father said, crossing his arms. "Filippo saw you with that witch." Gianna swallowed. Filippo had told her father the moment he'd seen Gianna kiss Francesca in the corner of a deserted side street. She'd been forbidden from seeing Francesca since then. That was when Francesca had begun to plan their escape. "What witch?" Her father grabbed her arm, squeezing her forearm so hard that she felt the bruises form. She closed her eyes. Not much more of this. She would be gone tonight. "Thought you'd get away with this?" her father said. "You will not leave this house." She had taken enough. She yanked her arm out of his grasp, feeling his fingernails drag against her skin and draw blood. She shook the pain from her arm, ignoring the blood dripping from her hand onto the dirt she hadn't swept off the floor. "Try and stop me," she whispered, venom in every syllable. He smiled. Instinctively, she took a step back. His smile was worse than his shout. Sweep the brittle wooden floors. The doors were locked. Damiano laughed at seeing her bruised face. "Your girlfriend won't love you when your nose is broken," he said, as he kicked her to the ground. She lay there, bruises smarting, expecting him to do more. It was then that she heard the cough. She looked up. Father. He always coughed when he drank. It was something they had to keep quiet. Otherwise, they would all be walled into their home and burned to death. Damiano looked at her, his sneer turning to terror. "No," he hissed. She met her little brother's eyes, the way forward lit in her head with a spark. I know how to stop a cough, she said. How? She shrugged. I learned. From the witch. To her surprise, he believed her. Go, he said. He isn't sick. I know, she said. She almost felt bad as she left the house, head covered in case Filippo was out. Then she remembered Damiano's laugh as he pushed her onto the ground, Filippo's comments about selling her into prostitution before their lives were in her hands. She stopped the nearest guard patrol. Excuse me, she said. My neighbor has been coughing all night. The guard stopped. The captain, or at least the man she assumed was in charge, went to her. Where do you live? San Raffaele, she said. Do you know your neighbor's name? She hid her smile as she gave her family name. How many in the house? 3, she said. There used to be 4. I think the girl is already dead. And just like that, Gianna Maniscalco was dead. Her first breath of freedom tinged with the embers of a fire beginning to burn. Stay away from the house, the captain said. We will take care of it. She nodded. She heard them turn the corner to investigate the house with the coughing man that they would find in bed, perhaps even coughing up blood. If she was lucky, her brothers would insist that she was there. The guards would see her bed in the corner. They would not believe her brothers. See how they would react to not being believed, to being ignored. Francesca would say she was being reckless, but she lived under their dirty thumbs long enough. She was done hiding their secrets, doing their laundry, cooking their meals. She went back for the chickens. She put them in their wooden cage and took them from the back garden. She walked out to the front, to where the guards had begun to seal off the house. The guards had already blocked the doors. At the window, she saw Filippo's face, thick brows frowning in confusion. What are you doing? He called to the guards. There will be no plague in Milan, the captain said. The guards stacked stones in front of the door in the side alleys so that no other house would burn. You may want to stay back, the captain said. This can be dangerous. Yes, sir, Gianna said. She stepped back and walked into the front street. The captain lit the fire and tipped it into the house where she'd spent years avoiding fists and shouts. The fire crackled, the smoke going up the chimney, the heat filling the main room. She saw Filippo and Damiano's chests heave with the effort as they breathed in the forming embers. That, she knew, was another symptom. Filippo coughed. She did not cough. She was used to breathing in ash. Her father and her brothers coughed out her name. She watched the fire embrace the house like an old friend, the flames dashing up the timber like rats before a coal. Gianna smiled, breathing in the smoke-tinged coughs of the men who would no longer be her burden. In the crackling of the flames, she heard her freedom. She turned away from the fire towards the Piazza del Duomo, where she would meet her future. There were no plague deaths in Milan, just burnings.
You've got some comments in the chat, one of which was me, and I wrote, there will be no plague. Thank you so much, Hannah. Our next reader, I moved my screen again. Our next reader is third place in fiction, Allison Westerink with Snow Globe.
Thank you so much, and thanks Sarah and Ryan for hosting this. This is amazing. All right. He had never given me a Christmas gift before. 15 Christmases, 15 midnight masses, 15 viewings of It's a Wonderful Life, all presentless. We had each other. What more did we need? We had a home and food, clothes and warmth. It was an accepted tradition to have a holiday without gifts until one year when a small box appeared on the porch. I asked Mark what he had ordered, and his response was, just a little gift for you. Intriguing. The box was light and silent when I shook it. I looked at the return label and impatiently Googled where it came from and found a home decor website. Riding the high of my new detective skills, I tried to find items on the website that could be lightweight and fit in a specific sized box. Not a rug or a lamp, couldn't be an elephant statue, most likely not from the baby section. After a half hour had passed, I decided I'd crack the case. It had to be a small decorative pillow. I'd be fine waiting 20 more days to figure out if I was correct. I put the box on the ground below the tree. More accurately, I tossed it toward the tree and kicked it gently with my foot to help it slide to its final resting place. Christmas morning came and my husband and I exchanged gifts for the first time well ever. I took his lead of home items and got him a set of knives he wanted for the kitchen. He opened them and feigned excitement, but truly did love using them when the time came. I began opening the box containing my pillow, getting ready to play the role of surprised wife, but it was not a pillow at all. It was a snow globe that had magically survived my mistreatment. It had a bare winter tree in the center, a birch covered in bits of snow. On the black wooden base was written a haiku: winter solitude, In a world of one color, the sound of wind. It was the most perfect gift I had ever received. I was addicted to all things winter, in particular the silence and blanket of white that covered up imperfections and made everything equally beautiful. I shook the globe and watched the glittery snow falling softly inside. I didn't have to act surprised. My eyes filled with tears at the purity of this moment and the thought that went into getting this gift. I looked up at Mark to say, thank you, I love you. His eyes were watery as well, but with a heavy sadness. These past few months have been rough on us. He was working late into the night. I was feeling alone and underappreciated. My job kept me from being my most authentic self, and it was exhausting having to pretend to be someone else 8 hours a day. There were times I would offer to help him at work, which slowly became work I was required to do. Our time together was mostly at his factory. I felt like my life outside of his world was no longer important to him, and he could feel it too. We were done. The gift made sense. We no longer had each other. It was a bright day in February. Sorry. 2 years later, when Mark officially left, if that's even a real possibility to officially leave anywhere, I walked through the house, tracing my hands along the furniture. The dining room table where we fought over dinner plans, celebrated birthdays, created art, where we stacked the mail. The kitchen counter where he made me breakfast every morning, no matter how tired he would be from the night before. The floor groaned predictably as I walked about the house. I recalled Mark coming home late. I could always tell where he was moving on the first floor based on the creaking wood. The heaviness in my heart exhausted me. I sat in a rarely used chair in the living room and looked out at the silence. A home I had known and memorized for 17 years was now a foreign wasteland. What is this place without all of its parts? I scanned over the figurines and candles on the shelf above our, now my, fireplace. The snow globe sat dust-covered next to 2 pieces of amber from our trip to Santa Fe. I took it down slowly and held it as if it were a newborn. I wiped the dust from the glass with the bottom of my sweater and held it in the sunlight, shook it, and cried. I placed it in the window. It was so gorgeous, shining and reflecting throughout the coldness of the house. I curled up in a ball on the couch and drifted off to sleep. I awoke to the smell of smoke, and as my puffy eyes cleared, I could see a black turbulent mass spiraling and growing in the sunroom. The curtains were being engulfed by a bright, fiery orange tornado while the smoke detector screeched its high-pitched warning. It took me a few seconds to understand what was happening. I rolled off the couch and army crawled at the front door. I ran shoeless into the street, coughing, tears running down my face. A neighbor came out from across the street and noticed the smoke from the first floor of my house. "I'm calling 911," he shouted. I stood, watching an unstoppable force consume my home. The destruction felt as though it was happening over hours, periods of bright flame, moments of large, billowing black smoke. Everything I knew and held dear was being incinerated. I listened to the hurried voices of firefighters and neighbors, but could only focus for seconds at a time. What happened? Is anyone else inside? She fell asleep. No, she's standing over there. Are you the owner? Pet's inside. Look at that fucking house. Did you know snow globes can cause fires? A brief sense of liberation came over me, knowing I would no longer have to live in a house of memories without my husband. I could start over. This thought was interrupted by a neighbor placing a blanket around my shoulders, asking me to come off the street and get some shoes on. Can't imagine what's going through your head right now, he said as he placed his size 10 loafers on my blue feet. What I wanted to say was more fire. Take my house, take every nail, every picture, every piece of furniture, and every last knickknack, and transform them into ash. But can you do more? Burn the times we made love during rainy mornings, set fire to the times he rubbed my back before falling asleep, more fire. Burn the park we went to on the weekends, and burn the playground we spent time at when we were teenagers. The bus where I first said I love you, and he said it back. You've ignited my wedding dress by now and all of the pictures, but you forgot to take the day from my mind. Burn that too, more fire. Burn the night I said I wanted to leave. Burn when he said, well, you can. Burn the packing that happened and the fact that neither of us fought for the other. Burn the years of kisses and heartache. I want to watch the smoke of our 17 Christmases rise up into the sky and disappear. The smoke colored the sky black and I was alone. Winter solitude in a world of one color, the sound of wind.
Thank you.
So much caffeine. I'm sorry.
That was really powerful. Thank you so much. You also have some comments. That was heavy. I'm very grateful to be here today hearing these stories. Our next reader is second place in fiction, Jason Martin, with What I First Wanted to Say Was More Fire.
All right, you hear me? What I first wanted to say was more fire, with a pause for dramatics, almost as much of a signature as the more fire itself, but then you gave it to me, and the crowd opened with cheers. The line was said, the fire was given, excitement had. That's a wrap for this episode. 45 minutes to reset, grab a snack, grab a smoke, grab some air, freshen up, and film another. Catch your breath, then get back to it. It's not art, it pays the bills. The crowd pleasers came out to keep everyone pumped and energized. The audience would remain the same from this challenge round into the results episode. They would vote, some would grab a snack or beverage, use the restroom, or generally gossip about what they thought was going on and who was the best. Many would be chatting up the crew, producers, assistants, and security, seeking something more. Some wanted an opportunity, some just wanted to see more backstage. Some wanted an autograph or really a selfie. The standing rule was to engage the fans and to talk them up, keeping them happy. Make them think whatever they want, hand them something. They had token items with fake call-in numbers. Everyone could feel like they were getting something unique, be in on something exclusive. It was all part of the show, like the voting and the other audience participations. Make them feel like part of the in circle. At the same time, watching for the signs. Most of the time, these signs were mitigated by the excessive chatting, the exclusive chatting and conversations. Then the special card with the phone numbers, the secret trinket to gain access later. Most of the time they were too overjoyed to press further and cause trouble. But there were always the special cases, the super fans. People wanted more, or maybe figured it out, or really just nutcases. They wanted to be on today. They needed to be on this show, this taping. They had the most fire. It wasn't fair or right. The show had special security with special procedures to handle this. Not the security out front chatting with the fans on set. Those were just part of the show. Super fans were cases for the real security. Ideally, what happens is that a special escort was called, making it play out to the super fan that they were right. But here was the real person they needed to speak with. This special escort would take them to the side hallway and down to get into makeup. The demeanor would become more serious, calling out over the radio they had a super fan, giving an air that the curtains were pushed aside, the charade on hold. They were entering the real deal. They were in. Down the hallway were mock dressing rooms. It was all facade. Security surrounded in all of the rooms. The special escort was one of them. Led into a well-appointed room, the superfan was directed to a makeup chair, the same makeup chair they'd seen on TV in various interviews. This was the official interview room, done in order to not alarm the superfan as they were brought in. Lighting up, they would hop into the chair with a makeup artist pulling a heavy smock over them. Securing it down, wrapped all over the superfan, they would ask, "What do you want to do? More fire?" A silent count of 1, 2, 3, as they lost themselves thinking about it. The room filled with people, all holding the superfan down. A spit guard was first put into place, then using the smock to hold their limbs and picking them up, a log carry out of the room was the last the show would see of them. No one really talked about what happened after. They didn't want to know. The problem was taken care of. These sorts of superfans were actually viewed as a good sign. The producers and showrunners saw these extraneous crazies as a sign that there was a lot of strong interest, a lot of strong passions underneath. They could push up prices, advertising prices, merchandise prices, get higher margins, more profits. More fire equals more profits, everybody wins. If there were less than 2 of these incidents in a day, it was a sign that things needed to be intensified. Special media campaigns were planned ahead of time, brainstormed and cultivated to add just the sort of spice needed. Today, Jerome saw it happen. She took a look. She'd seen it before, knew where to hide out of view, holding back far enough, just wanted to see what her signature, more fire, was bringing in today. It wasn't the first time, and she didn't disagree with it. Not sure why it mattered so much today, though. What was the big deal today? It just hit. All of the falsehood of it. All of the emotions bursting through. Jerome wasn't even her given name. It was just Jerry, after the comedian. Her dad loved that show, and how it just seemed to present the world as it was, straightforward and honest. Yet here was Jerome exploiting gullibility, pandering and stirring up make-believe emotions just to draw in the masses. A guise of sophistication, but no better than a daytime talk show. Back in the real makeup chair, thinking about it, while being made ready to go back out there, her feelings bubbling up and beginning to overwhelm. What was she doing here? Silently walking back out for the conclusion episode, ready to make a change, to make herself real, to put herself out there and everyone would see. What I first wanted to say was more fire, and the crowd held their breath, waiting for the determination and judgment. They'd made their votes and had their opinions. They wanted that validation. Was there fire, or did it need more heat? But what does that even mean? If you know, you know, the loyal cadre chanted. But no, not really. I mean, yes, I said that on late night, but no. What could it mean? Isn't it nonsense just to draw you in? She was overwhelmed and unsure where this was going and welling up around her eyes. I'm not Jerome, I'm just Jerry, right? And it was silent. Cinder stepped up. I was going to say that it needed more fire, but with her signature dramatic pause. But that was ice. The audience cheered. They bought it and loved it. They were here for the start of something. They witnessed it. They weren't sure what it was exactly, but that didn't really matter. They were here, it was happening, and it must be big. Jerry was caught off guard and looked over at the producers seeking comfort, then them stepping up and taking her hand. The camera had cut away to Cinder on the other side of the set, the apprentice turned master. This was planned and practiced, a certain contingency, only a matter of time, really. Jerry's hand was taken and she was given a big hug. They were talking and chanting and chatting and leading her to a better place to discuss everything. Over to the side and down a hall, it would be such big news. They'd call her agent and get her back onto the late night shows again. If you know, you know, all over again. It would blow up the socials. Everything would be different now. They were so proud, asking if they could get her a drink or what about a snack, and led her into a well-appointed room with a familiar makeup chair. The audience cheered. They loved it. Most of all, they loved being part of it. They didn't actually care what was happening. More fire was now, that was ice. And they were there for it. They swooned. Would Cinder change her name? The producers took note and the writers began to discuss. The security and camera operators, the assistants, and the others were just relieved that it all went down so well. They could feel it was coming, a change, but hoped there wouldn't be need for a new show, concept, set, and develop new fans. Just keep it rolling. And this was something new to reignite interest. It was perfect, stirring up some fire too with the loyal fans. All was right, all was okay. Paychecks would cash.
Wow, thank you so much. It is not my job to react for everyone. Thank you so much. We were all delighted that you were reading next to Firewood, by the way. Yeah, wow.
It's the clean part of the house, the clean side of the room.
It's not just themed. Wow. Okay. Moving on. First place in fiction, Rachel Rickson with 30 May 1431.
Hello. Mon frere, you have certainly heard the news of what currently takes place in my fair city. Rouen was in an uproar all morning as they stacked the pyre. The English and French alike crowd the market square in anticipation. Rumors abound. Some say she is a witch, most all say heretic, a dramatic few even whisper démon. You know I have never been a particularly religious man, but even I can be swayed by the events attributed to her. Barely more than a child, a girl, and yet breaking sieges, fighting in men's armor and rallying troops with the word of God. Her own false God, that is. I am not taken in by her lies. But her rebel French seem more than convinced. You have heard, you must have, that she leapt from a tower 7 stories and survived without injury. Whichever power she calls upon certainly watches out for her. She must have asked for a cross, as I see one held before her from my window above the square. The mob is vicious and they shout obscenities, but though I cannot hear at this distance, it does not take much to imagine. The girl is much less imposing and far fairer in her dirty dress than the shining armor in which she arrived. She is not much older than your Adelaide, I would guess, perhaps 20 years at most. The false prophet is now bound, and a holy man holds a cross in her view as the fire is lit. The flames seem so small, not even at her feet yet, and I fear the length of time this will take. I want to shout to these English executioners that more fire, more flame is needed to burn a witch. But as I watch the faces of her tribunal, those that sent her to this stake, I realize that this is their purpose. They want to break this girl. Watch her cry and scream and give in to the same terror that their troops have felt riding into battle against her. They want to peel back the godlike vernice that gilds her every move and reveal the falsehood within. She calls out. I cannot hear over the roar of the flames, and I admit I do not wish to look. The crowd is deathly still and quiet in a way I have never before seen. Even now, as the fire burns out, the crowd remains. They will stay until the coals have darkened and the English soldiers rake over the coals to reveal her mortal remains. I think, after all I have heard, I will descend to see for myself, one way or the other. Your dear brother, Thomas de Rouen.
All right, thank you. That was excellent. I was just also surprised by the brevity. Wow, maybe that's the secret. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine ever writing fiction in so short an amount of time. Like I've tried. I've done the Iron Pen contest a lot. I could not be more impressed with all of you. Also, I'd like to point out we had two pieces in the fiction department that were in the department that were well, not the same, but we had a 14th and 15th century piece, and that was funny to me. So let's move on to poetry before I say more nonsensical things. This is a category that, if you gave me 3 months to write something, I still wouldn't be able to come up with anything. So extra impressed in general, just period, with poetry. That's what you're here for, to hear how impressed I am. First up with an honorable, I'm gonna read the author and title of 2 of our honorable mentions, and then we'll have one read. So we've got an honorable mention for Andrew Taw with a piece called Say More, Say Fire. An honorable mention by ML with I Don't Want to Get Coffee with My Abuser and I Feel Guilty, which is a hell of a title. And then reading for us is Mendy Knott with an honorable mention for a piece titled Fire and Ice. Mendy, take it away. You are okay, good, you got her.
All right. This will be a good transition since it's a narrative kind of prose poem. It's called Fire and Ice. I'm sure you all familiar with the poem by Frost. But this is a recipe: fire and ice pickles, a gallon jar of dills, look on bottom shelf of condiment aisle, 5 pounds of sugar, not 4 pounds, 6 cloves of garlic, 12 whole cloves, 2 cinnamon sticks whole, 1/2 bottle of Tabasco. Turn for 10 days, top side up, top side down. Then keep ice cold in fridge. Love, Mom. As the dill pickle migrated south from New York and Chicago, more fire was introduced to the sour. Sweetness too, until the pickle began to resemble the women who lived below the waist of the Mason-Dixon line. Pickles were stored in ice boxes like Mama's, block of ice in the top, cooling what was shelved below. Don't hang on that icebox door gawking. Trips to the ice house were a freezing relief on a blazing summer day in South Central Arkansas. Sunlight seeped through the shades, slipped between cracks in the blinds, becoming ley lines on linoleum, and the old women hummed spirituals full of hardship, remembering days in cotton fields so hot they might fry an egg on a hoe. Fat watermelons unzipped with a knife were split in the shade of a giant pin oak. We buried our faces in green triangles and half moons, juice dripping from our chins on sultry afternoons. The shiny black seeds we spit at each other dotted the dust that clung to wet skin and stuck to the soles of bare feet. Evenings, sweat on upper lips, sliding down cheeks. Mama made more fire, stirring cream on the burner till it turned to custard. For us, another cool trip to the ice house. Blocks of ice picked to pieces, layered with rock salt around the silver canister of custard, while we took turns hand cranking the churn, grinding and slushing our mini Titanic, the day's heat all but forgotten in the transmogrification of vanilla custard, frozen water, rock salt, and perpetual motion into frozen delight. Ice cream was made by first turning up the fire, then a hard cooling, and finally ladled into a communion of cousins clicking spoons against bowls. Gone are those summer days. My mom, too, made ash by the friction of past turning present. As we who did not see the aftermath of Sherman forget that some things are worth saving, worth sharing, worth the time it takes to slow the journey. More fire cannot be brought to bear than can be born in a day without dying. 10 days to make fire and ice pickles because a slow marinating is required. Turn up the fire, for the heat that touches the tongue must be sweet as a memory that burns for a very long time.
Wow, thank you so much. I apologize, everyone. You're just going to hear me say wow and thank you a lot. I am so moved by everyone's work. Second place in poetry is Hannah Showalter with What I First Wanted to Say Was More Fire. Hannah, take it away. Oh goodness, I'm so sorry. I missed David. I lied to you, Hannah. You're not next. Third place is David Wright, who I'm so delighted to have read before and read again. I wish I had his book next to me. I could be like, see, look. He has a few books. We can go buy them. David Wright's third place in poetry, sonnet in which we try to translate the song of songs and terrify ourselves with love.
Thanks, Sarah. It's a near sonnet because I wrote it fast. There's a 15th line, but I liked the line, so I didn't take it out.
Unacceptable.
So, near sonnet in which we try to translate the song of songs and terrify ourselves with love. What first I want to say is fire, and more, because who doesn't love light and its flaring in the eye? Let's ignore what we don't hope to remember, flames bite of flesh, conversion of the very air into molecules, smoke into char, ash, when every ember left goes dark. I dare us to invite the match, the flint, our brash and bared needs feeding needs. We might as well be the bright heat, my love. We won't last long as the sun, but we have all that we require. This spark, our tapered limbs, both wild and strong, this bed of leaves to kindle with desire. We bless ourselves with breath becoming flame. What first I knew, when first I said your name.
Thank you. Yeah, wow. I don't know the name of all of your books. I know that I own Local Talent. If you'd like to shout out any of the others while you've got a mic piece, you're welcome to.
I'm good. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, next up, second place is Hannah Showalter with What I First Wanted to Say Was More Fire. Hannah, you are mute. There.
Okay, cool. What I first wanted to say was more fire, but what I really meant was that I wanted to want things again. Anything, sweet plums, hands unbuttoning my spine, someone crawling up inside of me. And I wanted to want myself back again, a person who never forgets birthdays and keeps things neat and tidy. This thing inside of me doesn't want. When I tell you I don't feel like myself anymore, it's because I don't know who I am if I am not wanting something. Apathy has never fit right on my body. If you kiss me, it will take me years to get rid of the taste. If you have ever told me you loved me, I have not believed it, but I have always remembered it. What I ask in the therapist's office is to be burned back to life. Wanting is embarrassing, but I have an ache to be embarrassed again, to stand in a circle of people and listen to the music of their laughter when I say I desire more than I deserve.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we all know that feeling. Wow, awesome. Our first place in poetry, as I understand it, signed up after the contest already started, with a nudge from a friend. So I'm grateful to the friend, and I'm grateful to the first place winner for participating. First place is, and I apologize, I didn't even think of asking how to pronounce your last name in advance, Deanie Valone with Brave New World.
You did it perfectly. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to Hannah for recommending this contest to me. Brave New World. That night, they sang The Tempest way out under the stars. That's really the only way to do it, you know. Throw your head back, howl, expose the throat. That's where the good stuff comes from, sweet waters. That night, the sky was the inside of an oyster shell. Flashlights outlined the grass circle stage. The moon did the rest. Ariel turned open its shoulders, shook off feathers, a storm, a story even, while the air in the distance smelled like a spent firecracker on a holiday no one could celebrate any longer. The world had slid away like a daughter's hand in a crowded train station. When things began to fall apart around them, their hearts closed like fists. Good, they wanted to say. Yes, they wanted to say more fire. They wanted to melt ash in their mouths. But when the smoke finally cleared, they softened. They reached for hands, books. Look, they said. They still had this. The stars, the songs, a cloak, no clock, a vicious hunger, a memory, a book full of the right words, mouths full of the right words, a circle, a sonnet, all the stars they could possibly need for a spell. It was enough before and still now. It is enough, even now. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you so much. So next up, I unexpectedly was judge of nonfiction, so I might have slightly more commentary of this category. I will try to keep myself brief. We're gonna start with I'm gonna list some names for folks who are not here and what they what those folks wrote, and announce, you know, that they got those awards. And so I'm double checking to make sure I know who is not here. So first we have an honorable mention from Morgan Rondinelli, Untitled, An honorable mention for Margaret Sherwin, titled Always and Olive Drab, and an honorable mention from Tammy Davis, titled More Fire. So let's then move into an honorable mention for John Turner, The One Sane Thing. Are you ready to read, John?
Am I unmuted?
I can hear you.
Hello? Oh, good. I can't see me,
I can't
which
see you
perhaps is a
either.
blessing in disguise. But yeah, my picture is not coming up. But if you can see me, then I will go ahead and do my thing.
I cannot see you, but if you're content to read, I'm content to look at your name while you read.
Okay, cool. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for having me for this contest. I was very happy to be in it. And I wrote an essay, little piece about something real, a book. And it's called The One Sane Thing. In my autographed book collection, I have 3 versions of Harlan Ellison's first serious book, Gentleman Junkie. This was the book picked up in 1961 by the venerable Dorothy Parker, who reviewed it, an exception at a time when paperbacks were not considered serious literature, and wrote, "Mr. Ellison is a good, honest, clean writer, putting down what he has seen and known with no sensationalism about it. I cannot recommend him too vehemently." This review started his career, not just as a writer, but as a writer other writers said people should read. The stories within remain some of his best. The title story itself from 1959, suggesting that non-degenerates, read white people, used drugs, was considered too shocking for most venues at the time. Daniel White for the Greater Good is a story that's hard to read about civil rights crises and a grim and pragmatic solution. Free with This Box is a story from Ellison's secretive, painful childhood that hurts to this day. 22 other stories run the gamut from dead musicians to juvenile delinquency to anti-Semitism and other stories of the hung-up generation, as the subtitle explains. Of the 3 editions I own, the most important to me is this one, the first one I read. It's brown and crumbling. I store it in an archival sleeve to keep it from turning to dust. Not only is it more than 60 years old, but it has been to hell and back, literally. I met Dwight Albee in a graduate writing class at UNI in the 70s. I sang the praises of Harlan Ellison in that class, and Dwight had this copy of Gentleman Junkie, and he gave it to me. And he told me its story. Dwight was a Vietnam vet. He served the requisite time there and saw the things one sees and survives in a war. It affected him. He would look at you when not speaking. To speak, he had to turn his head away from you. When he was done, he'd turn back and look at you again. It took some getting used to. He told me the time his best friend was killed during a firefight out in the jungle. Dwight, who even 15 years later was a small, slim guy, had to carry his corpse on his back for miles back to the base. In the hours of stumbling through the mud, suffering the stink of the dead body on his back and the ever ravenous insects tearing into the decaying flesh as he walked, he quickly became filled with rage at his best friend for dying way the hell out there and saddling him with this burden. The rage burned out the grief that was later filled with guilt. That was later, well, the guilt never really went away as usual. It would have taken more fire than anyone could survive to burn all that away. He handed me his copy of this book, saying it was the only thing he had over there that kept him sane. Contemplate that for a moment. These stories about murder, drug addiction, juvenile delinquency, rape, alienation, spirits rising from the dead, and the horrors of the urban wasteland were the sanest things he could hold on to during the Vietnam experience. He gave it to me. Like so many of us, this book is unreadable nowadays, threatening to disintegrate at the slightest touch. It is my greatest treasure.
Thank you, John. I recently bought a book of Harlan Ellison. This felt like synchronicity.
Yeah.
Thank you for reading.
Thank you.
Our next honorable mention for nonfiction is, oh, it's a goodie. Erin, I hadn't read John's yet. Erin Lewis, The Cleansing Ritual.
Oh, everyone can hear me okay? Content advisory for suicide for those who are sensitive to that topic. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's not hot enough to burn the body. Well, no one said it was easy. It was Bradbury that said it was a pleasure to burn, right? But it's sarcastic because Guy doesn't actually want to burn the books. Or is it that he learns to hate it? God, I can almost hear Miss Steiner right now lecturing me about it. Sorry, my memory's really gone to shit. I'm trying, I really am. This isn't fun. That's what I'm trying to say. Too often, I'm taking the scenic route instead of just saying it. Hemingway had that right, the simple sentence. Like a piece of minimalist art, it just sits in the middle of the paragraph and glows against the white snow. I think Hemingway had a thing about snow and the coldness and the serenity it brings. There's a building and it's snowing. I don't remember which book. I think his wife is dead. I shiver with that on the mind, with no help from this poor excuse of a fire. It's just little cinders underneath a couple of bent logs, dreaming that the fairy godmother will appear and whisk them away to the life they deserve. Anything to get out of the fire pit, and literally anywhere else. I'm tired of feminists reclaiming Cinderella. It seems like every few years someone gives it a try and gives her more and more agency, and that's a good thing. But you can't call it Cinderella just because she's trapped in a hopeless situation and gets out. Otherwise, we're all Cinderella, aren't we? Lighter fluid is illusory help. Sure, the fire will burn up fast and hot, but it's not the wood that's on fire, it's the liquid. Once it's gone, the fire will be pathetic again. Cruel, really, to make the fire think it has a chance, when really it doesn't. I grab the body. She's lightweight, only 97.3 pounds, and yes, the 0.3 matters when you're tottering on underweight. Sometimes she wondered if she were some kind of involuntary anorexic. But Samantha told the girl she didn't hate her own body, so she couldn't be anorexic. There's not a lot to burn here, is what I'm saying. Some skin and bones and organs, but that's about it. I drag her over and let the little cinders attempt to be transformative, but they're failing. Maybe the lighter fluid isn't such a bad idea after all. She didn't know that anxiety made it difficult to eat. That's why she could never finish a meal to save her life, even a kid's portion of a meal. At first, Samantha and Kaylee and all of them were supportive in trying to help her understand what was wrong, but it went on too long. It wasn't about the attention. She wasn't hungry and it scared her, because if she wasn't hungry and wasn't anorexic, then what the hell was wrong? I coat her body in lighter fluid and watch the flames bite at the flesh, at the clothes, at the hair. Fire's catching. That's what Suzanne Collins said. But she was talking about a revolution. The only revolution here is the moon revolving around the earth again. I wonder if it's gone insane doing the same thing every day as if tomorrow was ever going to be different. I am revolting, I think. Angela will tell you a different story because it's such a drag to say we broke up because I said yes to go to a concert. It is more complicated than that, but that's really why. We were supposed to go up north to the Apostle Islands. I even got us a camping spot on the nearby shore. If we go, I feel like we're just going to fight the whole way, he told me. But I want to be a normal couple and do normal things and be a normal person, I begged him. I've been talking about this for weeks to everybody. I can't quote on what he said next. Something about how deranged it was for me saying I wanted to be a normal person, as if that was reason enough why I was just some lost cause he left on a doorstep. That and a lot of think about how Angelo feels about this. His best friend, who he goes on to date, helped me dye my hair for this trip. I wonder if she knew then we weren't even going. It eats me up some nights, those thoughts. We lied to everyone. Oh, the weather was going to be bad, so we canceled all the parts of the trip we actually wanted to go on and are literally only going to the rest stop. Didn't say it like that, but that's what we did. He told me he loved me in that tent. He also told me to stop singing on the boat when we went out on the water. He just wanted to enjoy the quiet. I realized he would never get drunk and talk about how much he loves me anymore, and my mediocre singing wasn't sweet, it was annoying. I hate liars. Angelo is so particular about his image, so I did it because I loved him. The girl he goes on to date and our mutual friend both invited him to a concert, and he didn't explicitly invite me. We talked about this, how I just can't invite myself anywhere. I needed help. I didn't want to go as an obligation and said no at first, and then we talked, and then I felt safe, and I said yes the second time. You manipulated me into asking you so that you could say yes. The flesh smells horribly as it burns and pops and cackles like a witch at the cauldron. The smoke begins to blow in my direction, and I'm caught in her fog. And for a moment, I hear the train whistle in the distance. She wasn't planning on killing herself, but she'd gotten in a fight with Angelo. And she can't really remember what was said anymore, just the eerie coldness of the phrase, I love you. It happened in the university center when her friends were around, but she broke down a ways away on a bench seat and no one bothered to go look for her. She texted Samantha, desperate for an answer as to why. Why did no one look for her? Why did everyone leave? Why does everyone leave? Because we figured you went home your own way, she said. In the dark. Alone. She was furious. You were the one I called when that guy got out of his car and started following me. What makes you think I'd walk alone? The girl I am burning was an honest person, wore her whole life on her sleeves because it's easier to hide what you didn't want others to see when they believed everything was already in front of them. But her darkest secret clawed out of her lungs and through her throat and into her phone. Sam, I've never wanted to kill myself more than in this moment. Now her sleeves are burning. There's nothing to hide anymore. She calls her Samantha now to distance herself. It's a title, not a name. Samantha texts her the suicide hotline, and I can't help you. That girl, she couldn't be more proud Irish Catholic, even wanted to be confirmed under St. Patrick. Her blood ran green. When the train whistled, she became an atheist. No one wanted to save her, not even God. She had no place to go. Samantha was her roommate. Angela was angry at her. What she had was a train whistle and no reason to look both ways before crossing the street. She never did make it, gave up halfway and rerouted to Angela's house. Do you regret it? I asked the body. Going there? I do. I shouldn't, but I do. I crawled into bed with Angelo, and he jostled awake from my crying. I'm suicidal, I told him. The contempt, that's what I remember. You better be serious when you say that, he says. And he's almost annoyed, or maybe he's tired. I'm not a mind reader. I slept a silent cry. If only I hadn't backed out. I'm weak, pathetic. This is why no one could know I'd never get drunk on the wrong kind of courage and do it. What is the next logical conclusion? It's just for attention. Samantha has no idea I really did try to kill myself. I didn't really want to die. I just wanted to be. Now the girl is just bones. Everything else is gone. I douse her in lighter fluid again. I'm a bad feminist. I want to be saved by anyone. Call me a poor man's picky. If it's free, I'll eat of it. Maybe I should be more careful about who I let sit at my table. But Judas said at Jesus's final supper, is it so bad that I let Samantha and Angelo sit at mine? Christ, how can you look at someone in the eyes knowing they're going to sell you out for pennies and call them friend? I doubt either of them ever think of me. I doubt either of them know I am burning the body they broke, the body that wishes she were beaten so neither of them could walk away with the girl of their dreams and live the happy life they skinned off my face. It isn't fair that they get Cinderella's happy ending when I'm the one on fire. I am a mirror fragment of a shattered, traumatized whole that can't even find peace knowing that as long as they don't hit me, it's fine. All that remains are ashes. Little cinders glow amongst the gray, like the distant lights of Rapid City. It's not a pleasure to burn her, yet it had to be done. I promise you wouldn't recognize her alive if you tried. She's just so mangled inside. It's a miracle her lungs could work with all those ribs sticking through them. Fire destroys without consideration to who you are and where you've been, what you've done, and who you've helped or hurt. It doesn't care, and it never will. It doesn't just destroy, though. It nurtures if you let it. Ash makes for a great fertilizer, I heard somewhere. So I take my bucket and I get my hands dirty, piling it all in. A few cinders burn my fingers and I let them. It's okay. No one said this was supposed to be easy. When it's all collected, I head eastwards one step at a time. They tell me without a map I'm going to get lost. Except I am already lost. No one wanted to find me in the first place, so to hell with directions and the road traveled. Here's a question from my writing class. How do you write poetry after the Holocaust? I don't think I'm rising from the broken shell of a damaged girl to be better, faster, stronger, who doesn't need anything from anybody anymore. I am not the phoenix to make for a perfect allegory. I'm not the son of God who came back from the dead either. There's no miracles tonight unless you count the fire itself. I think the Greeks would have called that miraculous. A god gave it to them after all. I look at the ashes in the bucket. Maybe in 10 years or 20, I'll be a willow tree. Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to be.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really, really, really beautiful work.
Thank you.
Okay. Breathing. We have just had one of our honorable mentions pop back in, so I want to check in. I'm trying to adjust. Morgan, if you are interested in reading, now is the time. Just let me know, and I can move on as well.
Sure. Yeah, I am at work, so this is perfect timing.
All right, great. Take it away.
Okay.
Morgan, again, is in an honorable mention in nonfiction with an untitled piece.
All right. I hear a fire truck drive by on the road outside my boyfriend's window. Then another truck passes. They are headed south, the wrong direction to where I live. But immediately I know they're headed to my apartment anyway. The fire is already blazing, smoke is filling the sky, and my main selfish concern, I'm not home, so I won't be there to rescue my cat. Even worse, I know the fire is my fault. If I hadn't left the stove on, none of this would have happened. All the damage is my fault. All the people will get out, but pets will be less lucky. My cat, Jade, her death is my fault. I've had OCD for as long as I can remember. Literally, it is part of my earliest memories. I remember as a 7-year-old having the sudden thought before bed that my parents would die. And instantly my brain told me that having that thought would cause their death. Even at 7, I knew that was illogical, that a thought couldn't kill. But that didn't stop the rush of anxiety. How could I think something so terrible, so dark? And somehow, I knew the way to undo the thought was to knock on wood 3 times, even if that was illogical too. I could do this on the dresser next to my bed as I lay there waiting to fall asleep. But sometimes the knocking didn't feel right, so I would knock 3 times again. But while 3 felt like a good number, 6 felt unsafe, so I knocked again and again, but 12 was double 6, so that was unsafe. And did all these knocks count, or had I not put in enough intention? So I kept knocking. And again, trying to land on a safe number of knocks, both total and knocks that counted. It's a good thing I was already skilled at math. This went on for at least an hour until my exhausted childhood body fell into a restless sleep. I didn't grow out of having OCD, only the themes and obsessions continued to change and accumulate as I aged. Added on were thoughts about certain colors being unsafe, a smell on my hands leading to my suffocation, getting pregnant from sitting next to a boy, and causing a fire at home by not completely turning off the light switch or the stove. Some fears come and go, but fire in different forms has been a relative constant. I wasn't diagnosed with OCD until I was 19, at least 10 years after my onset of symptoms, an all too common trend. Sure, I had seen a therapist in high school for anxiety, but she never asked about these thoughts, so I never brought them up. How was I supposed to know they had a name? They were just my native thoughts. It wasn't until I was Googling irrational fear of getting pregnant from holding hands at 2 a.m. that I stumbled on a blog post about OCD. Here was this young girl that was having the same weird thoughts as me, and she was talking about them. I next searched, making sure the light switch is all the way down, fires. And this time a medical article about OCD appeared listing this as a symptom. I had always thought OCD was limited to washing your hands to get rid of germs. Dozens of articles, 2 documentaries on YouTube, and several hours later, my thoughts had a name. Names and diagnoses can be complicated, but for me, it meant a treatment. I started therapy with an OCD specialist I found immediately, and she confirmed what the blog posts had stated. I had OCD. While my high school therapist hadn't asked, this therapist asked dozens of questions. Do you have thoughts of certain numbers being unsafe? Yes, multiples of 6. Do you fear your thoughts can cause harm? Yes, since I was a child. Do you worry about fires, blurting out something inappropriate, needing your limbs to feel even, or getting anything less than perfect grades? Yes, 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 and yes. The treatment for OCD is also complicated and relatively unknown by those outside the community. Exposure and response prevention, or ERP, combined with medication and some other secondary therapies, involves intentionally facing your fears. Sit next to a boy and allow yourself to think about getting pregnant. Purposely slip a typo into an essay, risking a marked downgrade. Instead of avoiding or doing compulsions, the goal is to let the anxiety build. It can sound like self-inflicted torture, and it is in a way, but it's also effective torture. With gradual exposure, I learned that I can handle these thoughts without doing rituals. I can even start the onset of the thoughts myself, and I can handle the anxiety they bring. Slowly, I increased the difficulty, from avoiding a ritual for 5 minutes to 15 to altogether, or wearing a slightly dangerous color, light blue, to the most dangerous color, dark blue. And most of the time, the anxiety comes down on its own. I must be willing to imagine the unimaginable, to purposely bring these thoughts front of mind, because the thoughts will come anyway and incessantly. At least I can desensitize myself to them in advance. So that's how I find myself sitting at my desk, looking at a poorly photoshopped graphic I've made of my apartment building with flames on the roof, and I chant to myself, maybe there will be a fire at my apartment. Maybe I won't be home. Maybe no one will know how to rescue Jade. Maybe Jade will die in the fire. What I first want to say is more fire. I start confident. I can do this. Let it all burn, at least in my mind. But immediately, next I want to say, make it all stop. My chest tightens and I hold my breath. I can see my cat sitting not 10 feet away, sleeping unaware in a bundle on my bed. I am inside the apartment and the smoke alarms are not blaring. But what if the smoke detectors are broken? What if I just haven't left the stove on yet? What if my thoughts make it all come true tomorrow? I'm a smart woman. Thoughts cannot spark a blaze. I'm nowhere near that powerful, but the anxiety sure is. And despite the lack of logic, it all feels real. Still, I hold down my fort at my desk while just sitting there looking at the printed picture. Maybe there will be a fire at my apartment. Maybe I won't be home. Maybe no one will know to rescue Jade. Maybe Jade will die in the fire. I do this for a minute, then 5, until I can breathe steadily again, until I commit to doing the exercise again tomorrow for 15 minutes. With each tomorrow, the exposure will get easier. I will always see the building and Jade inside turning to ashes, but my response is reduced. Leaving without double checking the stove becomes a little easier. Leaving the house at all becomes easier. The thoughts still come, they always will, and I have always known the thoughts won't cause a fire. Truth may be hidden by anxiety, but it is not extinguished. What is rising from the ashes, though, is that I am more powerful than I thought. I can face fear, so let the thoughts burn.
I was really, really grateful to read that piece, and I'm really grateful that you were here to read it as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for writing it. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
Our next reader is another honorable mention in nonfiction. I have, again, lost the thing I'm reading from. It is Tammy Davis with More Fire.
Nerves taut and body shaking, I pulled out of the hospital parking lot and pointed my car toward home. Snippets of memory burst in my mind like bubbles in a boiling pot. I pushed them aside so I wouldn't fall apart. Don't think, don't cry. No, no, no. The ride home remains a blur. I don't remember the route or whether I called anyone or even what I did when I got there. The first coherent thought I recall is this: we need more fire. It happened by accident, really. The evening had started like so many others. Dinner time came and went, and the light outside faded under the setting sun. My daughter retreated to her room or a friend's house or wherever high school girls go when they don't want to hang out with their moms. My son, preparing to leave for college soon, hovered restlessly nearby. I think I'll make a fire, he said, and slipped through the patio door. Alone in the kitchen, I finished cleaning up dinner and wiped the counters. Afterward, I poured myself a glass of wine and decided to search for something to read. Just then, my son popped his head through the door. The fire's going great, Mom, and it's a really nice night. Do you want to come out here with me? Of course I did. What mother would turn down that kind of request from an 18-year-old boy? I grabbed my glass and sat next to him at the fire pit. Light banter somehow led to talking, really talking, and soon my son started sharing his hopes and fears for his new phase of life. College for him would be 1,100 miles away, and he faced so many transitions. When I got up to pour more wine, my son timidly asked if he could grab a beer from the fridge. My breath caught. I didn't know how to answer. He was only 18 and I'm a rule follower. As a responsible adult, his mother, how could I say yes? But I did say yes. Against every screaming fiber of my rule-following, risk-averse being, I said yes. After that, the night opened up. I thought our conversation had been good before, but that yes opened new doors. We talked about things teenage boys don't usually tell their moms. I shared things about my son, about myself he hadn't known. Our relationship shifted for a few hours as we began the transition from mother and child to something more equal. I watched the fire dance in his eyes while it pirouetted in my heart. We stayed outside until the logs burned to embers. My voice grew quieter as I stifled one yawn after another, but there was no way I intended to leave that magical moment a second too early. I have no idea why he chose that night to become my friend as well as my son, but it doesn't matter. When those moments come, you take them wherever they lead. 3 years later, I heard my daughter's voice rising through the ductwork to my second-floor home office. I couldn't make out her words, but I knew enough to run. Immediately. I found her in the basement furnace room pleading with my son. Please don't, I love you. Please don't, I love you. Please don't, I love you so much. Please don't. Pure instinct had led her to the basement at exactly the right moment. Beside my son, a noose hung from an overhead pipe while a small step ladder waited below. My daughter had saved his life. The details belong to us, and we continue to sort them out. 2 years later, we still have good days and bad, and the balance constantly shifts. This is new territory for me, and I struggle to navigate it well. There is no clear path, no formula for repairing lives that have become undone. I don't know how to help my children heal from trauma while also healing myself, but I tried damned hard. What I do know is this. The bonfire memory that came to me unbidden after I left my son at the hospital helps show me the way. We need connection. We need each other. We need more fire.
Thank you so much, Tammy. That piece is so powerful. And his cat. I'm sorry I forgot to give a content warning in advance of that. I did put that in the comments, but I want to apologize for not giving that. It's a really powerful piece, but it's a really difficult one. I'm so grateful that you were willing to share that with us, Tammy. On to third place in nonfiction. I present to you the only lighthearted piece I will be presenting to you. Jean Anderson. Only you can prevent forest fires when you are camping in the forest next to your house in order to win a bet.
I should tell everybody that it was sort of worked that it's going to get two birds with one stone. Not that that's a great image, but I'm going to be working with my little kids that I work with at the library, the Geneseo Library in town, and we're going to try to write worst case scenarios funny. So this once I heard that, I thought I can do this, and then I'll have something I can show them. So yes, there is nothing serious about this one, guys. Only you can prevent forest fires when you are camping in the forest next to your home in order to win a bet. You and your friends have accepted the challenge. Spend a night in the woods next to your house. No media, no phones. Cooking or heating must be from a campfire. Tents and sleeping bags allowed, flashlights optional. This could be easy if you and your friends follow a few simple rules. Number 1, check out the campsite early. The campsite you created months ago may be overgrown. You don't want to be setting up camp in the middle of poison ivy. Leave the tools, especially the shovel. You may need it later. Number 2, don't let the other team suck you in. Flashlights are not optional. When you forget to set up the tent while there is still daylight, flashlights are your best friend. Number 3, don't forget the water. Bring more buckets than you think you will need. See number 8 to 9. Number 4, gather dry firewood and tinder. While the idea is to start with the smaller stuff on the bottom and the bigger logs on top, nothing works if the wood is wet. Wet kindling and wet leaves will create an overwhelming plume of smoke, which will keep away the mosquitoes, but will also drive you away from the area because you can't breathe. You will then have to create the fire again, and it's pretty dark away from the fire. 5, bring more matches than you think you'll need. Refer back to number 4. Number 6, remember to bring the tools you will need. You may want something to stir the pot with while you are cooking over that fire that you finally made. However, you need to remember to bring the pot. If you think you'll just eat the beans out of the can, hopefully you remember to bring the can opener and spoons and mugs for the hot liquids. Of course, you could all share the one pot to drink the hot liquid if you remembered to bring the pot. Number 7, it's dark out there, very dark. What some people may want to say first is more fire. This may work unless, in order to feel safe, someone brought along their pet dog. Number 8, while some members of your team may feel safer against the wild animals in the forest if a dog is along, any dog tends to refer to its wolf status when faced with a dark forest. Dogs have hunter programmed in their DNA. If you make the fire bigger, the dog can now see the eyes of the curious raccoon sitting at the edge of the campsite. Said dog may chase the raccoon around the fire, dislodging the wood from the fire onto the dry grass and leaves around the fire, which will cause the grass to catch on fire, which will cause everyone to pour any water they find on the sparks flaming around the campsite. If you have a shovel, scooping dirt over the fires may help. Your hands can work for scooping if you don't have a shovel. The hands just don't work as well as a shovel. Number 10, if you don't have enough water and don't have a shovel, you lose your bet because you will have to go back into the house for more water in order to stop the fire. Tell your buddies it is more important to stop the fire than to win the bet. Number 11, save the forest and call the fire department. Remember, it is more important to stop the fire than to win the bet. Anyways, you can always blame it on the dog. Number 12, skipping the forest bet and staying home is also a grand option. You can pull up lovely campfire images on any media. Just Google campfires. It's much safer. And by the way, no animals were hurt in the creation of this production. Maybe a little pride.
Thank you, Jean. I I'm so pleased to have had such a fun piece. And of course, you are just always a pleasure to read. Our final our final reader who placed in nonfiction is first place, Samantha DeFilippo, Just Enough Fire.
The postpartum period carries the highest risk of developing bipolar disorder in the human lifetime. 50% of all women with bipolar disorder will be diagnosed after having a baby. There is something about birth that can trigger a manic episode, often a woman's first episode, possibly from the lack of sleep, the stress of major life changes, or hormones. Symptoms of mania include decreased need for sleep, high levels of energy, rapid or pressured speech, impulsive decisions, irritability, a flight of ideas, distractibility, exaggerated self-confidence, and increases in goal-directed activity. Too little fire, I thought bitterly. Depression had started creeping back the last 6 weeks before my due date, but I could hold out. No, I would hold out. After all, I had gotten this far without the antidepressants. It had actually all but gone away when I decided I could be a mom, even if I was depressed. But now there was a nagging doubt that I wouldn't have the grit to push a human out of my body, not feeling as extinguished as I did. More fire, I thought with each push. The doctor assured me I was almost there. So many times I accused her of lying. But still she insisted that the end was in sight. I pushed so hard I forgot to breathe. My husband worried I would pass out. But finally, my baby girl was here, placed immediately in my arms. I had rekindled the fire. Too much fire, I thought, realizing I was manic. Despite not sleeping for 2 days, I was bouncing off the walls with energy, too wired to even try to sleep. So I cleaned at 2 a.m. and wrote down flurries of ideas. Ideas that danced through my brain in a way they hadn't since high school. Ideas for a blog and children's books. Ideas that could cure shaken baby syndrome or become a New York Times bestseller. I encouraged my husband in his new role as a father, and I could talk anyone's ears off about my perfect little girl. It was the best time of my life, until it wasn't. Too much fire, I thought, as I fought to rein in the flames. Deciding against hospitalization, my therapist prescribed sleep at home, but I couldn't sleep. Spiraling for 2 days, I failed to get more than a few hours at a time. Descending into madness, I tried to prove I wasn't crazy. In fact, I was a genius. But even I knew how it looked, as I scribbled my frenzied thoughts onto Post-it notes at all hours of the night. I truly believed I had unlocked all my brain's potential, and it was running with the efficiency of a super machine, except with the annoying biological needs of a human body to slow my greatness down. That's when my husband knew it was time. The fire had consumed me. Just enough fire, I thought, to get me through 5 days in a psych ward away from my newborn. 5 days of meds and therapy, followed by more meds and more therapy on the outside. The stakes were high. I had to get better for my daughter, but I didn't know how to parent without being her manic supermom. Still, I had to try. Caring for her over endless Zoom therapy calls, taking over nighttime feedings as my confidence grew, nurturing the remaining flames cautiously, looking for rogue sparks that could get out of control. Just enough fire, I thought, to keep the flames from being extinguished again. Mania lit the fire under my ass that I never knew had gone out, forcing me to stoke the fire without getting burned. Mania was a vision of how my life could be, but also a warning not to fly too close to the sun.
Thank you so much. I feel so lucky to have been part of this process, the ceremony, etc. This year. I guess we'll move on to other readers. Really, everyone though, such beautiful work. Thank you so much for sharing your talents with us. Mike Bales, if you're ready to read your competition piece, I would love to hear it.
Awesome. I like the OCD piece. Truth being, I was more public bound in the past. My dad died and there's a fire in my apartment building about the same time. I got a big fear where I'd be late for work for checking the stove burners, that kind of thing. I can relate to it. And this is actually an apartment fire story that I got here based on, it's funny when you have an apartment fire, you don't talk to everyone. Then when you move out, you're all friends. It's called Fortunes. It was obvious that I'd have to move. We all would. Soot covered the walls of the hallways, and the doorway to apartment 9 was boarded shut. I packed what I needed for now and would come back for the rest. Maria, a neighbor who lived across the hallway from the apartment that burned, looked at me as she carried a box to her car. Beads strung around her neck rattled with each step. She wore a floral dress bought at a secondhand store. Although we'd barely spoken, we greeted each other as friends. She said that she had called it a fire, but we knew it was something more. There are questions to be asked, but the man whose apartment had burned was gone. The floors creaked as we carried our belongings as the apartment bore its age. Maria said that the building was haunted. It sat across the street from a grove of trees at the edge of town. What I saw during the night was two silhouettes of light dance together in front of his window. She thought she heard voices, and we were the only ones in the building at the time. The night had become a story born by us and us alone. Her daughter Jill was waiting in the car, waved. She had held a teddy bear in her other hand. Maria hugged me and said, "I will miss you. I will miss you, love." "Love?" I said. She nodded. From what I knew, she had a family somewhere. Mine was 500 miles away. She was taking classes at the community college. She said we all had dreams. I loaded my car and proceeded to leave until she said, "Our building is haunted." She left before I could ask. The windows in the 12-unit building shone in the sun, each a reflection of lives I'd barely known. Although there were apartments, something inside said that I would miss them. I checked into a motel. For how long, I didn't know. It rained the next day as I returned with my buddy. Neighbors hustled away belongings into trucks and cars and disappeared, while conversations about the man whose apartment burned filled the air. Someone said that he was a jeweler, and someone said that he was a poet. Someone said he was a sailor gone to sea. Although no one had seen him lately, stories remained. My buddy and I moved the furniture to storage, saving the rest for later. I handed him gas money and sent him on his way. I went back to see if Maria was there, but the lot was empty. Rolling clouds ghosted restless skies. My wet t-shirt and jeans hung to me like a second skin. I wanted to go to the motel and shed my clothes, but my stomach growled. I decided to grab a bite at the nearby diner. The lot was full. A bell banged against the door and rang as I opened the front door. Customers laughed as the woman stood behind the counter and talked with them. I sat at the other end. She turned and waved at me. It was Maria. She ran to me and gave me a hug. I noticed a hint of garlic. I knew we'd see each other again, she said, as the people at the counter watched. She led me over to introduce me to her mother and her father, an uncle and a cousin. She pointed to me and said, "This is my neighbor." They rearranged themselves to clear space for me between her father and her mother. Her father wrapped his arms around my shoulders. Her mother shouted, My little girl knew she'd meet someone." I gulped. The words, but I barely knew her, caught in my throat. And instead, I said, "She's a mighty fine woman," while thinking how stupid I was. Still, I had to say something. I felt the stare of every patron in the room. When I finished lunch, her father paid the check. I patted Maria's hand and said, "See you sometime," as she smiled to me. "It's a sunny day," she said, as I placed a tip in the palm of her hand. A tattoo of a crescent moon and stars graced her wrist. As I opened the door, I overheard her mother say, "He's a good man." As I approached the car, the sun broke through the clouds, although the forecast called for rain throughout the day. Got to go through the pages here. My life took on another rhythm as I rose each day in the motel. I worked and returned after checking the unit where most of my belongings were stored. Each night I ate at a different restaurant, although I'd promised to return to the diner. Every week I called the landlord, checking to see when we could move back. He said that he was tearing down the walls and the insides would have to be rebuilt. I asked who had moved back, and he said he didn't know. A voice in my head said, "You've got to see Maria sometime." The next morning, I took a clothing voucher to a Target store to buy myself a pair of jeans, trying on pair after pair. Maria walked to a nearby spot and handed me another pair as Jill watched. The jeans were a perfect fit. Funny meeting you here. Is this a coincidence? I asked. There are no coincidences, Maria said. The lights in the store went dark for a moment. When the lights returned, I noticed she and her daughter named Jill were smiling at me. Has anyone heard about the man in apartment 9? She shook her head. No one's seen him since. I kissed her cheek and promised to come back to the diner soon. The lights in the diner were dim when I returned that night. A lit candle on the counter flickered. She sat next to me as the cook brought us a dinner for two. I dreamed about spending a night like this with someone, I said. I felt a presence in the room and turned to her. She shivered and wrapped a sweater around her shoulders. Moments later, the front door opened and closed. I thought I heard someone cry that night, I said. She wiped a tear from her eye and said, it was a man from apartment 9, but none of us have ever seen him. Enough about him, I said. We kissed each other deep and strong, and I looked into her eyes. I don't know what to call this thing between us. I call it love. It's always love. Maria and I agreed to move in together once the apartment was fixed, saying it was better than being alone. A soft light shone upon us. I thought about people who live their whole lives just to experience a moment like this. But there was something else we needed to know. The next day, we went to the archives of the library and leafed through volumes of its local papers, unsure of what we'd find. There has to be an answer, I said. Keep looking, she answered. I shouted out when I found an article about the man who lived in apartment 9 and a woman who died. I showed it to Maria and said, but that was a long time ago. But he kept coming back for her, she said. We found a report about the fire and said the stove was turned on, as if the man in apartment 9 had been cooking for her, I figured. A month later, when we moved back into her apartment, the walls of the building glistened new, as if the man in apartment 9 had never been there. I looked around saying, peace to you, old man. At dusk, Maria and I split a bottle of rosé while sitting on our balcony as her daughter slept in her bed. A breeze blew, gentle and free. The setting sun colored the sky as crimson and orange, while we knew somewhere else a timeless passion burned.
Thank you, Mike.
A haunted story.
That it is. I think it's Ryan's turn to talk, actually, not mine.
Yo. Wow. I've just been sitting here quite like typing things in the chat occasionally and picking my jaw up off the floor. I feel like I was gonna say, I feel like I've been listening to like a 2-hour podcast of like new writing from the Midwest or something like that, but it's not just the Midwest because it's from all over. So just like new writing that kicks ass, I guess, like something like that. New writing that kicks ass in response to prompts by Ross Gay, or from Ross Gay Pumps. There, that's a wordy title. We'll workshop that later. Thank you all so much, everybody who read their work and was so generous with it, and really moving, really funny. Like it just runs the gamut, and I think this is one of the strongest responses we've had to a prompt, just in terms of like diversity of interpretations and sort of like period fiction and like how to's, and just really stunning. We're looking at ways that we can feature this work for those of you who are interested. We will be in touch. We've done it in our writer's block publication that we send out to all of our active members every year. We're working on a new website, and we're working on ways that we can include this beyond that, and maybe the podcast thing tickles the brain with ideas. So maybe those of you interested, maybe like putting these on wax, so to speak, we'll be in touch. There'll be things like we feel like these works should have life beyond this contest and beyond this reading, and of course, obviously for those of you that get down like that, you should be, all of you are, you send that work out, find good homes for this work. It's really terrific, and it was an honor and a pleasure to run this contest and hear everything everybody was doing. So thank you all again. Congratulations to all the winners and honorable mentions. Now contest time. Okay, drawing time, raffle time, whatever. So I'm alone in my house. My cat is here, but he's asleep and he doesn't have thumbs, so he can't really. He's not so good for the whole like picking names out of a container. But here I have a container with 129 names. We had to take one name out because we had a board member participate, and they can't win prizes. Sorry, board members. We love you and appreciate you, but that's not how we get down. So hopefully everybody trusts it's transparent so you can see, right? Or it's clear. So like, we're about transparency here. So I'm going to draw one name for the winner, and then I'm going to draw a second name. So if the person who wins is unable to participate or whatever, it will go to the second person. And I'm going to draw one more name just because we've had this happen and we've had it fall to like the second or third person. So that's a good shake. I can't. These are very tiny pieces of paper. Andrew Schaefer is the name that I've drawn. Andrew Schaefer. So Andrew, if you're out there, you do not have to be present to participate or anything. This is everybody that paid for registration. If you paid for 2 registrations, your name's in here twice. If you paid for 3, your name's in here 3 times, that sort of thing. So Andrew Schaefer, we will be in touch. If you are unable to participate, Andrew Schaefer, here, we'll do this properly. We'll shake one more. Get mixed back up there. Runner up, it's Tracy Payne. Tracy, if you are out there, big respect. If Andrew can't come through, we'll be looking at you one more time just to make sure we get everybody covered, because we want a winner to come from this contest. Last one. Too many pieces of paper in my fingers. Okay, here we go. Dan Moore. So there you go. Andrew, we'll be in touch, and we'll be in touch to all those people. But yeah, I think that wraps it up. Thank you all again for hanging out with us today on what's a chilly but beautiful sunny day here in Rock Island, Illinois. Yeah, we got a lot of things coming. Ross Gay is going to be our keynote speaker. Information for the conference will be going out everywhere to everybody a lot and loudly. We have other things coming up. We have other publications. We have this book that we published among a lot of other books, this anthology called These Interesting Times, Surviving 2020 in the Quad Cities. We're planning on doing in-person events for that. So like, stay tuned. We got a lot of things coming up. Spring and summer are our big seasons. So we look forward to seeing you online, in the world, everywhere. Happy reading, everybody. Thank you all again. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.